Let's the conference start. So I'll pass the floor to Hedda Vormeland from the Norwegian Association of Literary Translations.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you for the invitation. It is always a pleasure meeting colleagues to exchange thoughts and share experiences. And right now, with an aggressive war, it's raging in Europe, contact and communication across borders become even more important. Yes, my name is Hedda Vormeland, and I was until recently a board member of the Norwegian Association of Literary Translators. And I will tell you a little about our organization and what we are working on at the moment. The association's leader, Hilde Lyng, will talk to us later today about our standard contract. I will only mention it here as an example of the agreements we are very happy that previous generations of translators and publishers reached. But it is also, as I am sure Hilde will tell you, an example of how we need to keep working to protect those agreements. And it also shows how even a very good contract is a child of its own time and needs to be updated as the literary landscape changes. So I will illustrate this later by talking about what's happening around audiobooks right now. The Norwegian Association of Literary Translators seeks to gather Norwegian literary translators, raise the quality of Norwegian translations, improve the field's standing, call attention to the translator as a creator, and promote the understanding of the social importance of linguistic skills. The point of gathering Norwegian translators is to strengthen their professional identity and give them the chance to be an active member of a group. It is, of course, also important that by strengthening the translators' group identification, our chances of succeeding as a group are improved. A strong sense of professional identity and group identification makes it easier to talk with one voice, and loyalty is vital if we need to take action, as Hilde will tell us about later. In this context, it is important to mention that a couple of years back, we adjusted our membership criteria to be able to welcome more of our colleagues as members. We also reach out to non-members with information about agreements and tell them to contact the association if they are offered contracts they feel unsure about, or if they need any help negotiating with publishers. Non-members are also invited to meetings and seminars, and the grants we administer are awarded to translators without regard of membership. When we talk about Norwegian translators and fight for their rights, we are not talking about or fighting for only a fraction of them. As I mentioned, we arrange meetings and seminars, sometimes to educate translators on their rights and agreements, other times focused on literary or linguistic matters. Our seminar on rights and working conditions is tongue-in-cheek called How to Become Rich and Happy as a Literary Translator. And touches upon themes ranging from different ways of organizing your workstation. We've even had an ergonomist give us tips on preventing repetitive stress injury, to ways of planning for retirement. So it ranges from the very minute details to the very big lines. At our yearly 2-day seminar, we invite a variety of speakers, academics, translators, critics and writers, as well as people with great knowledge of specialized terminology, like weaponry and police ranks, very relevant for translators of crime novels, textiles and clothes, or the lingo of the medical profession. We usually also organize workshops with translators in language groups, where a handful of participants all hand in their translation of the same text and then discuss the difficulties and the solutions they found. Improving the field's standing has to do with the awareness in the general public of the translation process and the people who translate. To this end, we write op-eds, we eagerly accept invitations to talk to politicians and people in the literary field, and we frequently remind organizers of literary festivals and events that translated texts are, in fact, translated. This naturally flows into our next goal, to call attention to the translator as a creator. We believe that in order to have the good working conditions this conference aims to identify and promote, it is important that people in general, and of course first and foremost people in politics and in literary institutions, realize that the translator is a creator, an artist, and an irreplaceable brick in the literary wall. Taking away the translator would leave us with only debris of monolingual literatures. Being a translator is, of course, always negotiating languages and cultures. As a community, we are international, and we in the Norwegian Association of Literary Translators want to support our colleagues around the world. We are a member of international networks and organizations, both Scandinavian and global ones, and we have been a sparring partner for translators in other countries when they wanted to establish translators associations. I mentioned audiobooks earlier. The Norwegian Association of Literary Translators often receive calls from translators who need help to clarify agreements or communicate with publishers. This is important for us because it helps those individual translators, but it is also a very good way of staying in touch with developments in the publishing world. And recently it has made us aware of a completely new problem that we still need to work on. When the standard contract was first agreed upon, a book was only one thing: a paper book sold in bookstores. Of course, you could write to the publisher and ask for a copy and buy it through the mail, but that was it. During the last few decennia, we have seen the rise of audiobooks and e-books, even though the last ones aren't really a success in Norway yet. But this raised questions about remuneration, and we have been working on adjustments to the contract, as we will hear from Hilde. But the last couple of years, there are new players on the field, as publishers from outside of Norway, who are not members of the Norwegian Publishers Association, cast their eyes upon the quite profitable audiobook market. Making an audiobook is not that expensive, especially if you choose to publish books that are in the public domain. Or, and this is where it concerns the translators, if you reuse existing translations without paying the translator according to existing agreements. And this is happening in Norway now, and we are still trying to figure out how to handle it, as the publishers are not part of our literary system, so we don't really know what will be the solution to this. But this is one of our pressing problems right now. So yeah, this was a glimpse of our world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Hedda. We'll have some time for the questions afterwards. Of course, I think that if you have any questions, you can always raise your hand if there is something urgent you really need to ask. But we will have a floor for debate a little bit later on. And now I'll pass the word to Nina Herland from the Norwegian Association of from the Norwegian Non-Fiction Writers and Translators Association. We'll just do a small technical thing, which will be this one. And it works. So, Nina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Nina Herland, and I work at the Norwegian Non-Fiction Writers and Translators Association, also short NFFO for short. So I'm not a translator myself, but I have the pleasure of working with amazing translators in our organization. And I'll try to say something about translating literary non-fiction in Norway. And I have a short agenda, if the technology works. Whoops, it did. First, I would say something about the Norwegian Non-Fiction Writers and Translators Association, then a bit about non-fiction, the Norwegian model, how that works, and current challenges. And in the end, I will give you a little treat so you can learn more about the Norwegian literary system. The Norwegian Non-Fiction Writers and Translators Association is one of many organizations in the literary field. A typical thing for Norway is that we have a lot of organizations. We have the fiction literary translators, we have the audiovisual translators, we have translator? I don't know the word. specialized translator, we have a lot of organizations, both translator organizations, but also author organizations. The NFFO is a trade union for authors and translators of nonfiction. I will get back to what we call nonfiction. About 5,000 members, 500 of which are translators. We do a lot of things. Among others, we negotiate agreements and contracts with publisher and other public and private institutions. This is a large part of what we do. We always try to promote nonfiction and to strengthen the Norwegian language. We do that through attending festivals, other conferences, making our members stronger in their profession, etc., etc. And we also administrate something called the Non-Fiction Fund, which means that through this fund we distribute around 8 million euros every year to writers and translators so that they can do an even better job. They get more time for performing their profession. In Norway, when I say where I work, people often assume that I work for the Fiction Writers Association because people are not aware of what non-fiction is. A definition in Norway is that non-fiction are written texts that the reader has the reasons to believe are direct utterances about reality, which means we exclude everything called novels and poems and all kinds of fiction. And our association has to do with literary non-fiction, and that means it's only books or articles written by named authors or translators, and usually they're published by a publisher, but sometimes the author or translator, they publish things themselves, and that's okay. Different genres are as listed: articles, essays, textbooks, biographies, etc. We have a very broad range of genres within our organization that they write and translate. And short about the Norwegian model, because we have very strong organizations in Norway. We have, in the literary field, organizations with quite a lot of power and quite a lot of money to do things, and that has to do with how we are, how the system works. That everything we believe in, that we are stronger together. That there is a kind of a collective way of handling the issues concerning our respective members, and we also have a much both direct and indirect state support to all points in the literary circuit, meaning, for instance, we have a VAT exemption for books. We have book buying schemes, which is quite typical for Norway, where the government, through the Arts Council, they buy a certain number of books to distribute to the libraries. And that means that both the publisher and the translator gets a cut of this money, and which stimulates to new productions of new books. And we have also what's called the, lacking the words, sorry. Just a moment. The public lending rights scheme, which means that the government, through an agreement with the association, pays for lending out books in the libraries in Norway. And these are some of the arrangements we have. We also have remuneration for private copying, for copying in the schools, in the government administration, etc., etc. This means that we that through these arrangements there will be that generates money into specific funds, and these funds are used are granted to other translators and writers so that they can produce new books. Current challenges today has to do with, for our part, non-fiction versus fiction. We have a large part of our time is telling people that non-fiction books are also literature, because very often we are our translators are called that they're not artists, they're accountants or something, and that's something we try to tell both the government and the literary field in all every chance that we get, that this is also literary, although it's not fiction. One challenge is the decline in sales for translated literature. The latest numbers is down 52% from 2015 to 2020. So the market is decreasing, and that's a concern for us. As Hedda mentioned earlier, this expanded market is new actors who do not follow the established agreements, and that's something we are really concerned about, because they don't need to follow the rules that are established. We will always try to recruit new translators from more languages. We have a lot of English translators and a lot of German translators, but a lot of language we don't have any translators. And Czech, I think, we have non-fiction translators as in our association. The Asian languages, for instance, lots of languages where we don't get the literature. We have the English dominance in Norway, which means that the publisher often publish books in English instead of translating them, assuming that everyone is sufficient in English to read everything. Even in the universities, the academic texts are often not translated to the students, and that is a concern of ours. Also, the language courses at the universities are cut down, so very few can learn, for instance, Japanese or Spanish or something, and what will that do to the recruitment of new translators in Norway? And also, we talk much about the importance of translations and translators, because they are often neglected. When you see a text in Norwegian, you assume that this just came to be, and you don't see the work and the importance of a good translator who brings this literature into Norway. Yes, and one last thing is that in this room, I think somewhere in the back, we have a mini guide to the Norwegian literary system. So you're very welcome to take one home.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nina, for this interesting input. That's really very interesting to see that we are struggling the same things. We are facing the same challenges, and we will speak about it later. So now I'd like to pass the floor to a special guest from Iceland, translator Brynja Cortes Andrésdóttir. Is it pronounced well?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So thank you very much, Brynja. The floor is yours. You don't have presentation, right? You don't need any presentation? No, perfect. Thank you. The word is yours.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me here. My name is Brynja, and I work as a translator in Iceland. It's very interesting to hear how things are done in Norway. It's like everything is more, you're like our bigger brother, so everything is a bit more developed. So that's interesting for us, I think. So I translate mostly fiction from Italian and Swedish, or mostly Italian. So, and I took a master's degree in translation studies after studying fine arts and sculpture. So for me, this was a big, step into a more practical scene. And but when I graduated, I didn't know anything about the practical or or the publishing industry or the system or anything. So, and I think the more practical side should be a bigger part of the education of translators in universities, and communicating with publishers and so getting a foot in the publishing or getting your work published. And so I didn't know what to do. I just translated the book and tried to find a publisher, and I think it's quite common that people do that. And I was really lucky, and but often when people translate a book without having a publisher, they end up not getting paid at all or getting really peanuts. But if they have already translated the book, they sort of want to get it out. So, and but yes, I was really lucky because the first book I translated got quite a lot of attention. And then I started translating books by a very popular, like Elena Ferrante, who is extremely popular. So that was sort of just luck for me. But I know many translators who sort of struggle with starting. And yes, but in recent years, I think translators and translations are taken more seriously and have become more visible in Iceland. And the standard is getting is higher. And we can probably thank the Department of Translation Studies at the university for this. And also the Icelandic Translators Association, and with seminars and like literary prizes or prizes for translations, and this all helps making the translators' work more visible. And also, since in recent years Icelandic literature has been doing quite well abroad in foreign translations, which is of course very important for Icelandic writers. And this sometimes gets more attention, I feel, than translations into Icelandic that are, of course, just as important or maybe more important for like the Icelandic literature and also like the language, especially since we are a really small community. So it's important to get like foreign literature in our own language. And it also sort of fertilizes our literature and also the language. It's just really important. So I think one of the problems with being a literary translator, at least in Iceland, is that many people don't really consider literary translation a real job or a profession, but something you do sort of on the side. So I often meet people who I feel like this is something you do like in the weekend or sort of, or after when you retire you can sort of translate some books, but it's not like to pay the bills or. And I feel even some publishers don't look at this, don't feel like it's a real like full-time job, because maybe they translate once in a while. They translate a book, so it's like they don't understand that we have to get paid like on right time, and so. And maybe I don't know. Maybe it isn't a real job. Maybe it is good to have another something secure on the side. And personally, I've for a couple of years been doing audiovisual translation, mostly for RÚV, or the Icelandic National Broadcasting Service, and sort of translated literature on the site, and it's much more. I feel like it's much more secure and less sort of stressful. I get paid every month, and yes. So, and also, if you work like as a full-time literary translator, you sort of have to take what you get. You can't have the luxury always to choose the books you want to translate. and there's it's difficult. You're also in a really bad position to negotiate, being dependent on the publishers, and there's like no job security. And there are, I believe Magna, my colleague, will speak about the system of payments and rates, where it should, the system is that you're supposed to get more paid if for text that is time consuming. But usually, or from my experience, many publishers always want to pay the lowest rate, so it's sort of a system that pushes you into translating easy books and not, I mean, if you just need the money, so you, like recently I translated a novel, it was only about 100 pages by Fleur Jackie, I don't know if you know her, and it took me months, and then I translated like comic strips like Donald Duck, and it took me like a fraction of the time, and I got the double of the paid, so it's like, it's really not encouraging for translate, and also for the publishers, it's also, since they have to pay for the translations, it sort of pushes them towards publishing short, like not publishing long novels. So I think it's a system that, like it works in a way, but if you want it to be, I mean, if you want to have like long books translated, I think you should have sort of maybe like a system that like where translators should be able to apply for a stipendium from the state to translate, just like artists and writers and stage artists can apply to just like a stipendium for, I'm gonna translate this work, and it will take me 7 months, and then it wouldn't, it would sort of countervail this system. So yes, but and all, yeah, the publication grants should be higher, of course, but yes. So, but it's very interesting to hear how it is in Norway, with, because I don't think Icelandic translators are that organized, and no, I mean, we don't have like a special groups for, just sort of, we're much fewer, so it's and so, and it's sort of we should have more because when you're negotiating with the publishers, they can say, like, if you don't want this rate, I'll get another translator who can translate this from English. So even though, I mean, there are not that many translators translating from Italian, for example, but they still are ready to sort of sacrifice, or just maybe saying it, so I will agree on the rate. So yes, but I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Brynja. Thanks a lot. And now I'll pass the floor to Daniela. Daniela, I think you can sit there. I'll just prepare it. I'll manage it. Or do you prefer to stay?
Same for me.
That as you wish.
Need to
of course.
move in my presentation.
You'll do it with this kind of small thing.
Okay. Well. Okay, before the presentation starts, I think that I will probably say something similar to what Brynja has said, because much of this is really recognizable. I will talk about the questionnaire survey we did in October, November last year. And if you want to see the result, you can have this brochure, which is bilingual in Czech and English. And for the price analysis we did, that's the short leaflet you can get at the entrance. So I would like not to repeat what is in the brochure, but tell you some remarks about what we worked with. So this questionnaire was the first questionnaire survey done here in the Czech Republic among literary translators, and we hoped that this will help us to get some hard facts for future negotiations, because in contrast to the situation in Norway, where everything is really well organized, there is a very free market here in the Czech Republic if it concerns translations. We wanted to know who is the typical Czech literary translator. We wanted to know what the current practice concerning contracts with the publishers. We wanted to know more about prices, how they developed in time, and we wanted to know what our colleagues, what the literary translators actually wish and expect. There were some challenges we had to meet. We had some doubts about if we are good enough to make it, because we are not doing this in our daily work. And one of the challenges was also distribution, how to get the survey to everybody, everyone who has ever translated a book. And there we contacted the collective administration office, the agency DELIA, who sent it out to 1,500 persons. And we got some very interesting results. We got answers from 330 translators, which is, I think, approximately 1/6 of everyone having ever translated something. I mean literary translation. We got answers from people working with 31 languages, which is, I think, a very nice sample. And the translators told us that they were working with more than 60 different publishing houses, because in Czech Republic there are very many small publishing houses. So the market is actually quite colorful and quite big. For your information, there are approximately 15, 16, 17,000 titles being published every year. So in the brochure you will find this kind of figures with many numbers and percentage and whatever. But one of the suspicions we had was confirmed, that we are working quite hard, but we are earning too little. Probably it's a shock for you from Norway to see that we get approximately 7.6 euros per standard page. The Czech standard page is 1,800 signs, including spaces. The median is the 7.2, which does not differ that much. there are a lot of people, more than 1/3, working on literary translations just occasionally. There was another suspicion we were expecting to get confirmed or not, and that was that those who are working only occasionally, they don't live on literary translations, that these are those who push the price down, but it wasn't actually confirmed. As you can see here, but it doesn't mean that the full-time translators living on the literary translations, that they are those who push the price up. No, they are definitely not. So what's the problem? Why do we get so poor money for our work? Are we probably not considering the intellectual property as important, or do we not use enough time to negotiate with the publishers? Do we just sign the contract without looking at them? Almost 90% of us find the intellectual property important. So this is a lot, but actually there are a lot of respondents who do not negotiate when they are to sign a contract. You can see some numbers there that, for example, more than half part of us accept the offered number of licensed copies. That means that if the publisher wants to get for 40,000 copies in the license, we say yes. Why? Because a bestseller in Czech Republic, that means 10,000 copies. So if a book is successful, we should get probably some percentage or something. Why don't we require it? Why don't we say, well, if the book is successful, I would like to have a share on this success? The last remark, probably, 1/3 of literary translators do not negotiate their fees. They just accept what they get in the contract. There were some more interesting facts which are not that obvious from the brochure. I listed them here. There were also very positive things. I think that, for example, this one on the right side, there are more positive than those on the left side, that 6% of us, only 6% of us have ever got our fees reduced based on low quality or late submission. That's not that much. I think that we are really working hard and delivering our work in time. If it concerns the price analysis in time, you can see this figure that our growth, which is in red and yellow line, is actually very insignificant if we compare it with the growth in average wages here in the Czech Republic last 20 years. I think this is very obvious that we should do something with it. So there is a dilemma. What shall we do? Is it time to do something else, as some of our colleagues already did? Or is it time for negotiations? Is it time for get together? Because we don't have any contract, framework, or general contract as they have in Norway. Or it is possible that the invisible hand of market, the notion by Adam Smith here that this hand probably will strangle us, or is it just catching us, holding us by the throat? And one of the arguments I always hear is, but I love this job, I don't want to quit. But we should probably do something with it. There were a lot of things, a lot of questions we could ask as well, but the survey would be very long. But let me just thank all of you who participated in this survey. I think that 330 people, that's really a nice sample. Thank you very much, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Daniela. Thanks a lot. And the last speaker of this panel will be Lukáš Novák from Obce překladatelů. So I'll pass the floor to him, and then we'll have a little bit more time for a discussion, which is very great. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. My name is Lukáš Novák. I'm from the Czech Literary Translators Guild. So my speech will focus on the cause of literary translators, but from what we heard from Nina and from what I think you know from your own experience, the problems that we face are probably very similar in the field of non-fiction translators and interpreters, even though interpreters probably don't face one of the problems that the rest of us does, because I titled my speech Cooperation as Defense of Solitary Workers. I suspect interpreters are not that much solitary workers as the rest of us. We've heard a lot about, something so far, about the ambitious achievements in Norway from Hedda. Thank you for it. We've heard that, surprisingly for me, the situation in Iceland is quite similar to the situation in the Czech Republic. We've heard from Daniela why the situation in the Czech Republic is far from satisfactory. It only stresses the importance of exchanging experience and in general, and it makes sense to me that this conference brings together translators from such countries like Norway, where they've made a lot of progress in terms of improving conditions, and Iceland and Czech Republic, because it's obvious we can learn a lot from each other. I chose cooperation as the topic of my speech, and I think it's not hard to understand why. As I mentioned already, translation is a solitary occupation. On our own, we are able to deal with the complex nature of artistic texts. But it's not so easy when it comes to the complexities of the publishing world and book markets. But before I get to cooperation, let me briefly talk about something that Daniela has already hinted. And that's the mental setup of a literary translator, as I see it. Of some of the qualities, dispositions, and inclinations we have to feature in order to become literary translators. I will mention just some of them, don't worry. One of them, and the first and most important probably, is love. It's already been said here. Love for the job, a love for literature in general, love for art, admiration for art. Literary translators, or literary translation, is more than a technical skill, as we all know. It requires certain dedication, which is necessary and which is difficult to obtain if you do not have emotional ties with the subject of your or skillful endeavor. We love what we do, most of us, most of the time, except when the deadline is near. Another is ambition. We want to do our best. We want to prove our talents, our skills, our experience, our creative power. We want to do the undoable and translate the untranslatable. And still another one is modesty. We want to serve the author. We want to serve the greater cause of literature. We accept that we are always the second. We are always in smaller font. We are fine with it. We are rarely on the cover in the Czech Republic, and with this we are not so fine. So love, ambition, and modesty. And now back to cooperation and why the above mentioned qualities tend to complicate it sometimes. In contradiction to general beliefs, literary translation is a highly competitive field. Many of us want to translate novelists or other authors of fame or highly recognized quality. Many of us want to translate Elenas Ferrantes and other bestsellers. Still others want to translate the authors of their heart, something they just love again. And still others just want to translate whatever is published, whatever gets published. So the problem is obvious. There's just a handful of novelists. There's a certain limited number of great books or exceptionally good books, let's face it, to be translated. And there is always a surplus of available, eager, willing translators or wannabe translators, definitely more translators than books to be translated. So in economic terms, we are in a classical excess supply situation. The quantity of translators exceeds the quantity of demanded translations. In the world of pure economics, this leads to price reduction. What happens in the world of literary translation? Unfortunately, the same as we know. We are subject to the offer-demand pressure, just like everybody else. And competition leads, as I already mentioned, to the same effects as in the car industry, among car dealers or fashion retailers. Lower prices or lower fees in our case, and worse contractual conditions. And this brings cooperation on stage. This is why the Czech Translators Guild exists, and I suppose all the other organizations whose members came here today. This is actually why we came here today, to work as a community, to support our cause by collective know-how and by shared experience, which, by the way, is not a matter, of course, here in the Czech Republic still. Maybe it's different in the north, we can talk about during the coffee break. But here I feel we still have to overcome this certain mistrust towards collective efforts and actions, which is caused by decades of state-driven collectivization of every possible aspect of human activities and lives. And here I want to thank the host of today's conference, the Czech Translators of the North, because the first gust of the northern wind of change, to quote the name of the conference, came with the establishing of the Translators of the North. This, as I see it, energetic younger sister of the Czech Literary Translators Guild, which in my view very much contributed to the awakening of our organization, to its undergoing a transformation from something resembling a cozy club where friends and professionals meet and chat and commiserate, to something a bit more goal-oriented, go-getting, I hope. The benefits of cooperation on a platform of a professional organization are clear. Some of them have already been mentioned and by previous speakers, and others will be discussed during the whole day. But let me close by pointing out some of the limits of such cooperation, which I already hinted at, the aspects that hinder us from deepening the benefits of the cooperation. This brings me back to the three dispositions I see as typical for translators. Love for our job prevents us to quit, despite the fact it doesn't pay well. That's something Daniela already said. Together with the ambition, they make us accept assignments under conditions which are or should be seen as unacceptable, even if as a community we have repeatedly pronounced them unacceptable. And modesty tells us it's all right. We shouldn't be too loud. We shouldn't complain too much. Claiming credits is indecent. Talking about raising money is indecent. Talking about contractual terms is boring and indecent. And this only makes those who are driven by the principle divide and rule much easier to sort of have control over our work. So cooperation is just the first step. It will not suffice without going further. And the subsequent steps, in my opinion, should be comprised of education or enlightenment among translators, but also among readers and publishers. Massive communication of our cause, explaining people why translation is important, something that we know, but we have to explain the public. Then very important, in my view, is building a notion of something I would call professional pride, helping to build sort of inner barriers inside us, which would tell us no, be able to say no if you're not really happy with the conditions. And last, and perhaps least popular, applying certain criteria of quality or qualification in our field, which is very touchy topic and very difficult, I think, because translation, and especially literary translation, resembles ice skating in some ways. Certain things are measurable, there are certain points which are clear, but the rest is impression. So it's very difficult to, as you all know, very difficult to say what is really good and what is not. To sum up, achieving better working or contractual conditions and better price for our work means we first have to really be sure of our own price, and we have to make sure we do not go under it, under any conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lukáš. Thanks a lot. And now we have time for a debate, which is quite often very cherishful. So please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate. Ask right now. You can, of course, then continue during the coffee break and ask our panelists something in private. But it will be really very nice to discuss it all together. So if you have any questions on your heart, so please. I'll start now. If not, we'll... Okay, please.
While we're waiting for someone to ask something, I would thank you, Lukáš, for your words, but I would like to turn one of your statements upside down, because you said that there's an excess of translators, but I think actually you need to think the other way around, because the amount of books that are great and need to be introduced into your literature is infinite. There are so many good books. So if you manage to think that way and to maybe convince publishers that, you know, there are so many fantastic books out there and you would like to publish them, but you can't because we're not enough. So you need more translators and you need to pay us well so we can do the work, because I really think that is the fact. Yeah.
Thank you. If I may briefly react, it would be great if it was exactly the way you put it. Why I said it, I was sort of focusing on the experience of the Czech market, which we see as overly fragmented. So the problem is, even if it sounds terrible, and I'm sorry to say it, but there is too many books, too many translations, which means every keen reader buys a certain number of books, and then some of the great books are bought in numbers like just in hundreds, which doesn't pay back to the publishers, etc., etc.
Yes,
and then we
course.
get into the techniques of the market.
Yeah. No, I understand, and of course you are right, but at the same time it might be fruitful to think in a different way.
I love your idealistic view of the cause.
It leads me to a question. Sorry for because here in the Czech Republic, the publishers are quite often traveling around the world, or around Europe at least, to several book fairs, and they're speaking with those how do you call them? Like companies selling book rights, and they are all only reading those like short words about the book and those like annotations, and that's almost all. And they realize, okay, how many? They ask always how many books were sold, how many copies were sold, and this is the most important thing for them, of course, the numbers. And then they read this a short word about it and say, okay, it's something that could be interesting for Czech readers, and they buy it without knowing if the book is good or not. How is the practice in Norway? Are you more involved in the process of choosing the books?
I do recognize what you're saying, and also the fact that for many books from small languages or distant languages like the Asian ones, or the English translation or even a sample translation is often the gateway to the European market. So an editor might read excerpts of a book in English, and then when they buy it and it's finally translated into Norwegian, the editor might not really recognize the book because the English translation is heavily edited. So yeah, that is a problem. And because of that, I really see translators as very important partners for publishers. And I am a translator I translate books from the Dutch. And so I try to stay on top of like the Dutch literature. I read a lot, and I can talk to editors about them. And well, recently there was a book that created quite a buzz in Frankfurt last fall, and I read that book, and it wasn't really good, and it didn't really fit the description they gave in English. And so I could tell the editor, like, I don't think this is a good idea. I mean, if you want a book that is like this, you can buy this book. But if you want a book that's like the description they give, this is not it. So I think translators can really be very important partners. Yeah.
How is it in Iceland, Brynja? You said that you have quite limited possibility to choose to find a book, but can you also, like, do you read in Italian, and do you can you come with an offer to a publisher?
Yes, well, I think I've been very lucky about that. So I've chosen, I think, most books, and also publishers in Iceland. Like most of them have asked me, if you know anything good in Italian, please tell us. But then when I come with the books, they don't publish them usually. But I think it's a lot of work to read all these books and try to convince the publishers. But it's possible. But they usually, in the end, they want to choose themselves in Frankfurt or somewhere else. Yeah. But they asked me really, and yeah, but most of the books they want to choose themselves. And I think if I've thought about this, I actually thought about like forming my own publishing house just to be able to choose more. Because in the beginning I could choose everything, so I thought I would be able to choose everything. But it's sort of been down. Or like now when I have another job translating like subtitles, I thought, okay, now I'm only going to translate books that I want to translate. So because I think I'm quite slow at translating. I think it's very difficult. I mean, I love translating, but I think it is difficult. So if I don't like really love the text, I think it's just not worth it because it's badly paid and everything. It's just much more. I like it much more if it's something, and also the feeling if it's something. I read a book in Italian, and it's sort of a feeling that I am. It sounds like some hubris, but I am sort of bringing it to my language. Something I chose. It's a different feeling somehow.
I have a question for you, Brynja, because you mentioned translating a book, then taking it to a publisher.
Yes.
And that sounds very strange to me. So could you explain this?
I did that.
Do people generally just pick books?
That's like the first book I translated because I didn't know anything. And I had started translating this book at university. So I just finished it. And I was sure, because it's like a famous book, and I was sure like some publishing house would love to publish it. So, and then of course I found out this is a totally wrong way to go about it. But I think there are, yes, I know, but there are people that are like translators of passion, who translate like the old classics without being asked to, and then I know some of them because I mean maybe I've been a bit negative here and speaking sort of because there is a system, there are rates, but if I translate like War and Peace or something, and like just to mention some, or Anna Karenina, if I translate that, and nobody has, like the publishing houses don't have the money to pay me. So in the end, because I already translate it as like a passion while I work somewhere else, then some translated, I know they have sort of not gotten paid, or like got paid very little, but I mean, it's not, this is like a side, I mean, it's not like this, it's like beside the system. And usually then, I mean, I don't think the big publishing houses would do this, but it's sort of some one-man publisher would sort of, we make a deal, okay, you publish the book, and I will just get, you know, the grant from the government and maybe some, but it's not like recognized practice, but I know it happens.
There is a question there. Just please wait a second for the micro. Can you raise your hand?
Hello. I found Brynja's contribution actually very interesting in a way because it just sounded so familiar, what you say about the attitude, the general public and the publishers thinking that translating is actually a hobby that you have, that you do in the weekend, or you do it after you're retired. I was wondering, how does that ring any bell in Norway? Is that the way that our profession would be seen, or do you have more of a mindset in Norway in general that it is a real job that should be paid real money in real terms?
Well, thank you, Radka. It does, in a way, ring a bell in the sense that people often or tend to think that translation is really easy. You just write what's in there. Yeah, and it's maddening sometimes trying to explain what you actually do. But I think it has changed quite a lot over the past few decades, really. But still, some people, like from the academics, will translate because it's tangent to their field, so they will translate texts that has to do with something they are working on, and then maybe, get it published. But then it's more of a spin-off thing. So I don't think most people will view translation as a hobby. Not really anymore. So no.
But how to like improve that? Because you were speaking about translators as an author, as an artist, like how to promote this kind of aspect of our work. Work with the government, that it's like in the laws and that the law improves, or is it like public opinion we have to change? We have to speak more about our work.
Yes, to everything. No, I think it's all intertwined. It's all part of the same complex. But I think a profession. Oh, I can't pronounce the word. Making translators more professional is certainly key, and also like raising public awareness, definitely. But I think everything rests on the fact that we have good copyright laws. I mean, that's where everything starts, because if you're not like legally in possession of your text and in a position to negotiate publishing of it, you don't have anything to stand on. So that's like the basic. And then when you have that, you can, yeah.
And how is the situation in Norway? And how are you? Like, do you have any concrete examples? You were working with this? You are dealing with this issue?
raising awareness. Well, we like one example is a few years back we did together with NFFO a project where we would scan every ad for books, like translated books, everything the publishers made public about the translated books, and we would count like where they left out the name of the translator, and then we would make so we made like a really like concrete with the numbers of everything, and like on the website of publisher A, they have like 15 translated titles on the front page, 5 lack the name of the translator. This is not in accordance with our agreement, and so we would publish this on our own website, and of course they were they didn't find that nice because but we usually remember, yeah, but you know, you have agreed to remember every time, and it has improved, and certainly in social media, I think. Don't you agree? In Facebook posts and stuff like that, they now usually remember to like when they tease about a book, an upcoming translation, and they will write like, finally it's coming in Norwegian, translated by, yeah, which is, I think, it's a small thing, but it's very concrete, and it was fun to work at as well, because it's tangible. I mean, you can see that something changes.
Interesting, because despite everything Daniela said, we still face this that like publishers, when we also did a little bit the same, like we send a letter to everyone, to every publisher, that we would love to see our names like more, especially when you have extracts or excerpts from the texts. They forgot it quite often, but they love us, like publishers. Their reactions were very positive. They were like, of course, we love our translators, so we would love to do it, and we will improve it. And then nothing happened, or it did, but a little bit. So always we are approaching them, always we try to contact them. They are very in favor of our work. They know that they need us. They try to make it better, but the system is such, I don't know, huge, complicated, that it takes a long time. But there is a will. As I understood it, your publishers were not that happy with your approach?
Oh, well, they felt like no, they weren't angry, but they were like kind of sad and like, "But we're doing our best." No, you're not. So it was more of that reaction, and of course, I mean, things have improved in Norway, but it's not perfect like the advertising thing. Only a few weeks back, I saw this ad for a book that had been awarded a translation award, and it was in the ad like this, the book title, and like got the translation award, this and that, without the translator's name. So it's like, yeah, it's a fantastic book. It's fantastically translated, but yeah.
Daniela, you had a question, or no? I thought you had a question. No. Anyone else? Okay, Radka again. Do you have a micro, please? Maruško.
Thank you. Yes, in a way, I would like to get back to the question that I asked before. And it actually brings me also to Daniela's contribution, because she made a breakdown of the time that the Czech translators actually spent on the occupation that they chose. And only about 1/3, if I'm not mistaken, is actually doing this work full time. And I think it has to do with the fact that it's so badly paid, and with the general perception as something being of a hobby, which why it is not paid well. That is why the people cannot do it as a main occupation. Many of us can't. And my question is, do you have a similar breakdown for Norway? How many of the members of your organizations are actually working full-time as translators, and can they make a living translating books?
We do have those numbers, or like, but I don't. But.
So, floor is to Hilde Ling.
Thank you. I think that about 1/3 of our members, and we're about 240 members. 340, sorry. So about 100 active literary translators of fiction. And many of us... yeah. And I think quite a few of them are full-time translators earning a living.
Thank you very much, Hilde. So the situations are quite the same. Do you think this? Of course.
I think, a reason why I think it's so difficult to be solely a literary translator. It's not because I can live off the wages, but it's just so difficult to sort of organize that I always have something like, because 1 week I'm asked to translate like 3 books and I have to say no, but then like 4 months later I don't have anything, and also because you don't get like paid every month. It's like you're supposed to get paid like a third when you sign the contract, a third when you leave in the book, and a third by the publication, but it's almost never like that. So you sort of have to wait. It's sort of disorganized. So I think that's a big part of it, why it's so difficult to have this as a main job. It's not like, because I did live off the, I could live off the wages, but it's just so difficult to, especially if you want to choose the books, and so sort of it doesn't, like the puzzle is a bit complicated, but yeah. So
Daniela, you were speaking about €7 approximately per hour. What does it mean in the Czech reality? Like, what is do you have any, like, can we compare it with like how many, do we know how many pages have to be translated in 1 hour to get like some hour rate? Do you have those numbers or no? Because you are speaking about €7, I would say that now it's like, the minimum is about like €10 per hour we have here in the Czech Republic, something like that. The minimum rate, or I would say that you have to translate like two pages in an hour to get, or something like that. Or I don't know. Am I completely swimming here?
I don't think that the minimum wage is the same as €10 per hour. But the problem why we didn't ask about this more specifically in the survey is that actually it's very, very relative how long you spend on translating 1 page, because it can be a novel, it can be a crime novel, which is okay, but it can be a non-fiction that is very time-consuming, actually. So we just asked one single question about this in the survey, and it turned out that approximately 1 standard page with some extra work after it, after editing and rereading and reading the typesetting. So it can be approximately 1 hour per standard page, and that means that those €7.2 is for an hour, which is less than the average wage in the Czech Republic, but it's more than the minimum wage. So that's the only concrete answer I can give you.
Sorry, it was an average rate I was speaking about. It's 10 now. Now the average rate is €10 per hour.
Yeah, and I also think because we are also getting paid like by the page, and I have colleagues who find it really uncomfortable to make the calculations and find out how much they earn per hour, and also I think it's shameful to make very little money. So if they do time-consuming work, they prefer just not to check it, and I think that's also a key to change, maybe to realize that we need to unwincingly look into those numbers and find out, because our standard contract also gives like leeway to negotiate higher prices if you do work that's really time consuming. But I think most people don't do it because it's shameful talking about money.
Do you see any gender aspect in this also? Any gender gap? Because the survey, if you look around this room, and the survey showed that, or the survey was responded 70% by women, right, Daniela, and 72%. and 28 men, which of course it doesn't really mean that there is 73%, 72% of women of the translators are women, but it could say that. Speaking of everything we spoke about, means also that the gender gap, then the pay gap is also because of that higher in our country, or is deeper, can we say?
Well, I would like to answer that, but I don't think I have like the numbers. But the book world is is female in Norway as well. But I think our members are roughly half and half. Huh? So yeah, but that's our members, and the proportions of like active translators, and I wouldn't know, but it might be a factor, of course, definitely.
Oh.
Just a very short remark. If you look in the brochure on the very last page, I think that one fact is very interesting, that in higher age, when we are older, the difference between male wages or fees and female is bigger. The older translators, male translators, they earn more. But I think there is one very nice perspective, that in younger groups, these are the women who get more money. So this is probably something changing in future.
Thank you very much. Any other question from the public? Yes, please.
Good morning. I'm from the Slovak Association of Literary Translators, named DOSLOV, and I would like to ask all the colleagues if in their countries there is any significant difference between the big publishing houses and the small publishers. Like we have a number of almost one-person publishers in Slovakia, and it starts to show that they may be the game changers on the market, because they usually pay higher wages to the translators, and these small publishers are the one who starts to put the translator on the cover. So if there is any difference in your countries.
The standard contract is the same, and only publishers who are members of the Norwegian Publishers Association are bound to that contract, but most others also use it. So there are not really many differences there. But we actually have a couple of new publishing houses, or like one-person publishers run by translators, which is really interesting, and they manage to get support, they get grants from the government, and they publish really interesting translated titles, and they promote them as translations, and that might actually change something eventually, I believe.
To what Hedda said, it's the publisher who are members of the Publisher Association, that what are the standard conditions in a way, but also we see that new actors on the field, they see perhaps translators as more content producers than translators, which we are very concerned about, because that means that they don't really realize that this is a copyright product, that the translator has the right to the translation. They think that they can just buy out, and that's a concern, and that's often the newcomers, the small actors.
Yeah, in Iceland there's like one huge publishing company, and then there are the smaller companies are sometimes more ambitious, I think, and sort of there are some that are sort of actively publishing translations as bringing literature from like far away to Iceland. There's like a sort of a statement, but the pay is always the same, I think, or there's no big difference. And it's just always this. Yeah, they have the same contracts and the same. You sort of have to fight for not get the lowest rate, or so.
I can try to do some more data processing from the data we got. Probably I could answer your question in some time.
I can only add impressions, just again like this ice skating, because last year when we started sort of reviving the Czech Translators Guild, me and my colleague Anežka Charvatová, who's the chair of the guild, we had some meetings with the biggest players in the Czech book market, and it's obvious that even among those two biggest companies there is a difference in approach. It's probably difficult to generalize. And then when more publishers come together around a roundtable, which will be maybe discussed later, you see that it's very individual. Overall impression would be that the smaller publishing houses tend to be more translator friendly. But again, as Martin said, it can also be just like a better communication, but in fact nothing is changed. So it's difficult to say so far, but we will be definitely trying to focus on that.
I think also maybe the smaller publishing houses, they simply have less money, so it's not like that they are unkind to translators. They want to pay well, but they sort of have less money than the bigger ones. So
thank you very much. Any other question from you? Nina, you were speaking about English as a language which is dominating, of course, and almost everybody in Scandinavia speaks perfect English and understands perfect English. So is it something which is you said it is a threat, but do you think that this is the future, that everyone will read books and other translations only in English? And do you also see any maybe also like disadvantage of the common Nordic market, because Norway has a smaller market than, for example, Sweden. We here in the Czech Republic can compare it with the situation in Slovakia, where you have some books in the bookstores are in the Czech language because it's not for the publisher. If we are speaking, for example, about the professional books, it's not. They cannot translate to Slovak because they will not save that many copies, but they buy Czech copies, which is of course problematic for the language, because then the language in some areas is not developing because the expert books are not translated in the local language. So how do you see this issue?
First of all, in the academic field, we see that it's a lot of English dominance. They assume that the students are well equipped to read academic English articles, and I think that when the students in Norway only read English, and it will have an anticipation that they don't need the Norwegian language. So what will happen to the Norwegian language when nothing is translated, and you read better in your mother tongue than in another language, and that's yeah, that goes without saying in a way. But the arguments from the publishers and from the academic environments is that it's expensive. It costs money to translate. It's cheaper to have English books because the English market is, of course, much greater than the Norwegian, and therefore the students can have cheaper books. The publisher doesn't need to publish new books and have that costs, but of course that is a problem. And the other question you had was regarding.
If you think it's the future, or if it will be really like that it will be books only in English.
Yeah, I fear that in some way that I fear that one will stop translating books from English and maybe from other languages only, because you don't have the need. The publisher doesn't see that we have a need, and as you say, the assumption is that Scandinavians read English very good, but we see that in the universities, the studies that are made is that the students learn less when they read Norwegian than when they read English than when they read Norwegian. So,
and do you have, for example, books from like Swedish books?
We also have Swedish books because
of that.
Yeah.
And what can we do with it? How can we deal with that?
Well, that's a political issue in a way, to see the importance of maintaining the Norwegian language. That is important because it's a small language, and if we want it, we need to work to prevail what we have. And I do believe that as the political situation in Norway is now, it's very much talk about how important it is for us to bolster the Norwegian language, to work to improve it, and to strengthen the position in all fields of the society. So there's hope.
Lucky enough that our knowledge of English is much worse here in the Czech Republic. And the Czechs are very lazy to read in any other languages. Do you have any question? Yes, please, Linda.
It's not really a question. It was just a thought, because you mentioned that you have trade unions of translators. Is it so? Was it trade union? No. Was it trade unions you spoke about? Is it possible to have trade unions of people who are not employed here? Or why don't we have trade unions? That was my question.
Won't you answer this question? Will you answer this question, Lukáš, or? Because we are cooperating with EEA. They started to do some kind of unions, and they can, because they are independent interpreters and translators, and we try to find some kind of cooperation with them, because if you can be the part of this trade union only if you are a member of their association. So maybe we'll try to do something similar, or we'll see, but it's definitely a way. They are cooperating with Středula, with this it's
the head of the unions. Yeah.
Exactly. so of the main association of trade unions of the here in the Czech Republic, and despite it was seen as some kind of cartel that you cannot do, they seem to find a way. So how to do that?
Actually, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about the legal conditions under which we could form trade unions. That's the first thing. And then another thing is whether we really want to do it. That's maybe a political, philosophical question. Because if I should say my own opinion, I would go using the soft skills, the soft tools, which is education, promotion, pressure on politicians. That trade unions I'm afraid even that the discussion over trade unions would divide the translators community more than unite it, because it's politically touchy. So that's my opinion. Perhaps I should say I'm not talking on behalf of the guild now.
But as I said, the Czech Interpreters and Translators Association, they try to find some way in that. But also an interesting remark on that, that you said, Daniela, that 2/3 of the people are not in any professional association, but 83% expect that we will protect their rights, right? So maybe there's also somehow a way to let them know that they have to be part of the process, right?
I hope this conference could change it, but I don't know how many of those who are not organized are actually here. But this was one of the biggest contrasts we got in the survey, that there are many who are not organized, but they would love to if the organization was something for them. But I think that there is new board in the guild, and I hope this will probably bring some change.
Yeah, just one short remark on that. It's this insoluble thing, like, okay, I would go into and get organized if you did something for us. Well, if there were more of us, we would be able to do something. So it's like this magical circle which we need to break now. And of course, on any occasion, I'm inviting everybody to join the guild, because I think united and more numbers, that's something we face when we meet with the publishers. They say sort of, you know, on the margin, but you know, you don't represent all the translators, not even majority of them, and they are right.
How is the situation in Norway then? Do you have a lot of members, and do they like to? You are speaking about a lot of workshops and seminars you are providing. Is it something which is popular?
Our situation is a little different because, our association is also administering government funds. So that is one of our roles, and we do that on behalf of the group of artists. So not for our members, but for everyone. So that's one part of it. And the other one is that our association has a membership criteria. So you have to apply for membership. And like the needle's eye was really small before, and it's still kind of narrow, but it's gotten wider because we also appreciate the fact that we need to organize more of our colleagues, and especially the ones who are actively translating. And I think we are succeeding. We're on our way there, but we are also we have, like the last couple of years, also been doing more to raise everyone's awareness that we are representing the field, like the group of translators, not only our members, and we are also inviting them to our seminars. And our members are they come to our seminars and our meetings usually. We have 340 members. With the average age is quite high. It's 62.5 years or something. So not everyone is still actively translating, but still around 1/3 will come to a 2-day seminar, which is amazing, I think. And it's also, there's a very strong sense of belonging and sense of profession, and I think including both retired translators and active translators is also very important in the way that, like, we learn from them and they tell us about things that, I mean, like fights they have been through earlier, and and we so it's really it's building the group identity, I think.
You want to add something, Nina?
I think that the age average in the NFFO is 64 years old, so a bit higher than your association. But we see that from the oldest, they really appreciate and understand the community of the organization, but we are struggling to recruit younger translators and younger authors as well, because they're asking, what's in it for me? You will fight for my interests either way, so what's in it for me? And our best arguments are that we have lawyers, which will help you when something goes bad, and they often do. We have someone to help them, but we're trying to find a way to see what can we do to be more attractive as an organization. And my colleague Camilla will speak a bit about what we're doing for our members later today.
Great.
And just an end note that I think loyalty is really important, of course, loyalty to your colleagues. And I think being part of a group makes it easier. Like, for instance, I am in the lucky position that I have enough work. So And when I get offered some editing work or something that I don't have the time to take, I will not just decline, but I will say, okay, I can do it if you pay this, which is also always higher than they would like to pay. So in that way, I try to like raise the prices for the colleague which will eventually get the assignment. So yeah, that kind of thing. And it's those things are like small, but if everyone does things like this, it will actually help. And I think the chance of achieving that is better if you like create a group with a strong sense of group identity.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much. So now there's a time for coffee pause. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot to all our speakers. Hedda Vormeland. Thank you, Nina Herland, Brynja Cortes, Daniela a i Lukáš. Děkujeme moc krát. Thank you very much. And so we'll meet here again in 1/2 hour, 11:15. Have a nice break.